we have this series where we've been going over all our demands because it was like it's been like 2 years, over 2.5 years since we co-founded 10 Demands, and I owe Zoya and Awkward a lot in terms of my development. They taught me a lot. They do a lot of great work. And we're gonna talk about our seventh demand, but we also have a great guest. This is the first time we have met, Dylan, but you come with strong recommendation from my friends Zoya and Awkward. So Zoya and Awkward advocate for you. I know you're gonna tell some powerful truths. So thank you for joining us on RBN, Dylan.
Hey, I appreciate being invited to this party. This is going to be outstanding.
Yeah. So since this is the first time you're coming on RBN, before we get into the discussion, I want to acknowledge your background and how you come and get to have your expertise in abolition and criminal justice. So can you just give us a short introduction to the work you have done and your point of view, and just so people know where you're coming from?
Yeah, I'll do my best to do it quickly. My day job is as I've been working for over 20 years as a professor in the University of California system. I did my advanced degree in ethnic studies. And more importantly, I've been engaged in various forms of collective organizing, intellectual, and I'd like to think as insurgent and pro-insurrectionist work for pretty much almost my whole adult life. And we'll put it this way, y'all. I was engaged with abolitionist shit before it became an apparatus for liberal extraction and absorption, right? Like I was calling out abolitionists everything when folks would look at you like you were wild and crazy, because we were. First of all, we were that. I embrace that, but a lot of folks actually experienced the term abolition for a long time as an offense. You know what I mean? As an incitement to violence, by the way, which it also is, because if you're offended by it, you probably should be offended by it. But no, I just really appreciate the 10 Demands project. I appreciate being in community with y'all now. I appreciate this introduction. And anyway, I write, I think, I teach, I do all kinds of shit. And I'm really happy to be with you all.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm able to have the introduction with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from your point of view, because we're gonna go through our seventh demand, and I'm gonna pass it to Awkward, like I always do. For the people who are new watching this, I'll just quickly read the demands. And on this series, we focus on one. Because if you see here, we had the video for our first demand, our video for our second demand, and you also can click because we had a long conversation. Awkward and Zoya, very well versed in the theories of abolition. Once again, I learned a lot from them, like straight up. So we are every one of the demands are well thought out. We want to lay out a plan for activists on a local level where we can implement this as well. So let me read them all off, and I'll pass to Awkward before we get to the seventh one, and I'll allow you to break that one down, and then we pass it to Zoya. Then the first demand: defund the police and reallocate resources to impacted communities. The second demand is demilitarize the police. Third is eliminate discriminatory policing, prosecution, and sentencing. Number 4 is institute some complete law enforcement transparency and accountability. And once again, we did segments on all these. This is where these segment videos are coming from. Number 5, independently investigate all police crimes and abuses of power. Number 6, install community representation, oversight, and safety measures. And this will be the demand we will focus on today. And this is extremely important. In strategic counter-protest violence. Now, this is one of the things that really, really make us a fascist police state. So we're going to talk about that here soon. Number 8, this is going to be our next episode. Apologize and provide reparations. 9, in the war on drugs. And 10, in carceral punishment. And our website is 10forjustice.com. You can read about all those demands if you want. But I want to pass it to you, Awkward. Here's our 7th demand. This is going to be the focus. And if you want to speak on anything on the other demands as well, you can. But do you want to do the introduction for the 7th demand for our video series here, Awkward?
Sure. I don't usually read them, but I will say before I say anything that I had the opportunity to interview Dylan months ago, and it remains the most important interview and best interview I've done.
And, I gotta check it out. I gotta make sure.
Man, yeah. I know he probably.
Hey, send it to me after this if you get a chance. Send it to me.
I will. And I know he probably hates it, but I call him my hero all the time. So this,
Nice.
having Dylan on with us is important to me. Look at his face.
I'm nobody's hero. Let me hey, meet you. Hey, later you can meet my 15 and my 19-year-old. They will tell you I'm nobody's hero. I love you and I appreciate you though for saying that.
I know, man. And my wife would say that too. I think I got my kids though believing I'm a hero. But anyway, moving on. So yes, we live in a country where, in 2020 alone, 14,000 protesters, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, etc. I mean, this includes Army vets. It includes Walls of Moms. Were arrested in 2020 alone. Yet federal judges have gone below the government sentencing recommendations in 2/3 of the Capitol rioter cases. So for me, this is a specifically important thing, not only because it is, dissent is patriotic, but also because the specific people that are targeted for doing certain things, just like outside of protests, when we're doing drugs that are in our home or doing drugs on the street. White people do drugs more. White people sell drugs more. Or I should say, white people do drugs the same amount and sell drugs more. And yet, who's in prison for drugs? So the same happens here. We go out and protest police brutality and receive police brutality. We get disappeared by federal agents. We're locked up for long periods of time. Jessica Resniak, for instance, a nonviolent protester against the destruction of our planet. She's in prison for years. Meanwhile, if you do something on behalf of fascism, on behalf of Nazism, on behalf of hate, then of course you get away with it. So that's where I stand on it. And I apologize. I'm not going to, I don't want to read this. I think it's really important that everyone go to the site, 10forjustice.com, and read all of these things. But to put it simply, you shouldn't be arrested for protesting. If you are, you shouldn't be sentenced and prosecuted. You shouldn't be in jail. Anyone who's been incarcerated needs to be freed immediately. And we need to change the laws that enable cops to not only arrest us and put us in cages, but also all the work they do to terrify us and injure us and kill us with the variety of weapons they've been given from the federal government.
Thank you, Awkward. Always a lot to say there. Zoya, I want to get you in here. And then Dylan, I want you to speak on this as well. One thing I want to add, because I cover a lot of foreign affairs, and I always like to point out the hypocrisy of our state. You have Zionists, you have neocons in our country that demonize countries like Iran, Russia, and China. And they say, look at these authoritarian countries. We are not allowed to descend against the government. And I'm not even going to speak on that criticism. I'm here as a citizen of the global empire. I'm going to call out the West contradictions. So that may or may not be true what you said. But I remember what happened in 2020 when you guys used tear gas on protesters. And guys, do you guys know tear gas? That is considered a war crime. Our government used war crimes to stifle the dissent of their citizens that protest against the state. So any criticism you have on other countries is null and void, considering what you do. So I'm gonna get Zoya in on that thought. Dylan, I'll get you guys you in after this, and then we can open the panel. Awkward, if you want to chime in after them as well. So Zoya, go ahead if you want to add to the discussion.
Yes. So first, I'll read the demand, and it is a very
Thank you, Zoya.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen as well.
And it is a very important demand for the times that we're facing, as our right to protest shrinks by the day, and all the things that you mentioned are happening. So it is to end strategic counter-protest violence, repeal all anti-protest laws, terminate all officers guilty of arresting or applying unnecessary and excessive force against protesters for violation of their civil rights as guaranteed by the First Amendment. Ban the use of tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and all other crowd dispersal methods. Strip police authority to issue dispersal orders. Expunge all protest-related convictions and free all protesters in jail or prison. So this demand really enables our ability to protest for any of our rights, for any of our demands. It's really crucial for us to be able to protest this government and unjust actions in some way or form. And what we saw during George Floyd, that even peaceful protests, which most of them were being attacked. And I sent you an image, Nick, of what happened during those protests, which, you know, this is just a small window into it. But decades ago, I used to be able to go protest for environment and other causes without real fear of repercussions. I thought I might get arrested, and I was prepared for that, but I didn't fear violence. And I used to even take kids with me. Now, having lived through George Floyd, it's become such a military survival environment that I would never dare bring a child into it. And we saw how violence escalated even to the point of Kyle Rittenhouse, who got off for actually shooting people. So I feel like we're really in danger of having any recourse against our government. We see that the people we elect to power do not represent our interests, and protest is all we have left, and yet they're trying to strip that away from us. We've seen pipeline protesters are being charged as domestic terrorists under the Patriot Act. So now anybody that opposes government action can be put into this domestic terrorist category.
That's fascism, guys. Is this what you want me to show, Zoya? But that's exactly what fascism is. But go ahead, Zoya.
No, that's a different one I want you to show, and it's a good reminder as well, because protests have now become illegal in several places, including West Virginia. Like we see here, it's illegal for public employees. So teachers are right now illegally on strike against the law. It's literally illegal for them, just from a worker perspective, to go out and protest for better wages. But they have gone so fed up that they're currently breaking the law by protesting. This is a good one to your international point, Nick, as how our protest rights are being impacted.
Yeah, I was going to cover this with Misty tomorrow, but this is a great video because now you literally have the ruling class people saying this out in the open, appealing to their liberal base, their authoritarian base. Well, they're like, yeah, we're going to have measures in place where we can stop these disruptive protesters. And then they say stuff like, oh, they're white supremacists, they're right wingers, and they use that to justify giving state more power to stop protests. And then they always use that power against the left, black people, indigenous people, and other marginalized communities. Do you guys understand? But Zoya, I want you to continue.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great segue for us to actually play that video just for people to hear.
You want to play what video we playing? The James Melville tweet?
The one that
you send me a few. I'm trying to figure out which one you want me to send. It is the police escalate violence at George Floyd protest. Is that the one? The video?
Yes.
All right. You see. While I pull it up. My friend Zoya always sending me powerful receipts. she's like the unofficial researcher of RBN. Cause a lot of stuff I be covering, like Zoya know I'm gonna talk about it. She's like, "Yo, Nick, you see this?" I'm like, "Man, thank you for sending me that." I think this is the video, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's play this. The title is Police Escalate Violence at George Floyd Protests Across the U.S. So great video. Let's dive into it. Bruh. So as you guys continue to watch this, I want you to think of the liberal reaction if this footage was coming from Iran, China, or any other countries that we demonize. This is the authoritarian hellhole that I thought we will become if we enacted socialism. That is what they tell you when you grow up. But this is what we are going through right now. Right now. Under a capitalist neoliberal United States.
Go inside now! Get in the hole!
He said light him up. Jesus
Get in.
Those weren't even protesters. Those were people in their neighborhoods outside Minneapolis.
Jesus
sitting on their
fucking
porches.
Christ, man.
Yo,
Jeez.
everybody's a fucking protester. You know what I mean? Like in that police lens, everybody's a fucking protester. That's why.
It's us versus them. That's how they see it, guys. Us versus them. We need to start seeing it the same way.
So, Dylan, can you do me a favor and bring this back to, you know, how this relates to a larger abolitionist framework?
Yeah, I can try, y'all. I mean, there's a lot to be done with this, but I think one thing that the diasporic Black revolutionary abolitionist tradition, I think, teaches us is that the thing that we now call counterinsurgency, which in this case is about the repression of really primarily Black liberation struggle, and then other forms of liberation and anti-colonial struggle that have a relationship to Black liberation struggle, that there's a ongoing, one-directional, multifaceted attempt to wage war against all forms of liberation struggle. So what you see here in the seventh demand, I think, is a start. It's a bare minimum, right? And here's what I'm gonna say is that if we think seriously about the long history of counterinsurgency, I mean, not only does it play out in what you see in these videos that we were just looking at, right? Counterinsurgency is very much about police repression of, I'm not going to call them protests, right? It's police repression of forms of collective gathering, forms of community making that pose any potential threat to business as usual, right? And of course, business as usual is a deeply violent and in many cases a genocidal, apartheid, racial capitalist structure of domination, oppression, and misery, right? So that's what business as usual means. So what the police literally exist for is, of course, to protect property, right? Which is to protect white supremacy and chattel, but it's also to establish and militarize on this larger climate of business as usual, which means that really any form of community, and I'm using community as a verb, right? Any form of activity that constitutes the making of community that poses the potential to disrupt business as usual becomes cause for that form of war making that I'm talking about. Well, we can call it repression, we can call it strike breaking, we can call it whatever we want. But I want to say also that this is deeply cultural, meaning that it's not just the state that mobilizes the repression, but it's ordinary folks, right? I'll say one more thing and I'll shut up for a minute. But we're in the middle of the largest university strike in U.S. history right now, in the University of California, my employer. I've been on the picket line since day one, November 14, right? I've gone on strike alongside the striking graduate student workers. And what you saw, unsurprisingly, but still outrageously, over the course of about a week, was a gradual kind of messaging from the University of California administration, including the UC Riverside administration, to appeal to faculty and staff to call the police if they detected any disruption by strikers that they felt was a potential threat to business as usual. Right? So the culture of administration, the culture of, and this is about a university setting, right? The culture of response to any modest disruption of business as usual. I'm talking about chanting, people beating drums, folks walking in the hallways where, holding UAW signs. That's the disruption I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about anything more escalated than that at this point. But one of the weapons of first response is to call the cops, right? And what you have in the history of the University of California is when the cops show up to deal with any disruptions of business as usual, it very quickly results in various forms of violence, of suspension, of repression, of jailing, criminalization and whatnot. So we're talking about a culture of repression, not just individual isolated deployments of police repression.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad you brought up what you've been a part of for a while. I've been watching that. And, you'd warned me about that institution when we had our conversation on tape. So yeah, I'm sure you're not surprised. But as you said, this happens all the time. We're like, well, we're not surprised. Still fucking outrageous. Still hard to believe, even though we knew we should believe it before it even happened. And I'll just add one last thing. You mentioned this culture of repression, a perfect example of the ivory tower, and another one of just like, upsetting capitalist routine is the way they go after mutual aid groups, like the gym in Brooklyn. Every time they go out, they get the shit beaten out of them. They get everything stolen because like they're giving stuff to people who need it in their communities. That, like you mentioned, community, even as a verb, activity, they don't want us to be in community or build community.
Yo, you're on mute, boss, or something.
Oh, sorry, my mic. Damn, I told you the mic always give me problems, guys. But Dylan, I think I want to pass it to Zoya. I want to share this.
Well, I
image.
just want to say it's not all hopeless. We should get outraged. These things that are happening should not be happening to a single human being. So the outrage is justified, but then it's really important for us to channel it in productive ways. ACLU recently had a victory over the Minneapolis Police Department for the George Floyd protests, which included $600,000 awards and damages for plaintiffs, and the police are being barred from arresting or using physical force against people engaged in lawful protests. In California, we passed a law banning the use of tear gas and rubber bullets during protests. But of course, these are small gains. We need much more. I'm just trying to illustrate that we do have gains when we apply pressure on the system. We shouldn't allow the gravity of the situation to make us apathetic, because when we become apathetic, these things multiply unchecked, and the only choice that we have is to keep fighting back.
Yo, can I just loudly agree with this sentiment and say that the point of acknowledging the depth and the reach of counterinsurgency and state repression is it should be something that radicalizes people toward more transformational tactics, strategies, and thought. I will say that there is nothing that makes the case for a thoughtful, practical program that leads toward police abolition. There's nothing that makes that case better than watching how it is that the police respond to otherwise entirely docile, so-called peaceful demonstrations and protests, right? Nothing makes the case better. In addition to what Awkward just talking about with police disruption and violent destruction of mutual aid forms, including among unhoused people, among sex workers, among different criminalized communities. The fact that what the police end up doing is they try to undermine and destroy life-affirming, life-giving practices, that actually makes the case, ideological and practical case for police abolition. So if anything, the violence that we see from the state should be activating us. It should not be undermining, a sense of collectivity. It should be fortifying a sense of collectivity.
And should we be talking about police abolition? Because I know when you talk about abolition, it's about a lot more than that. It's about a way of living, beyond, right? And it extends far beyond that. But I'm wondering, like, in the same vein as the hate that I have for the defund is not the right message crowd and concept, in a way, it's not entirely untrue that you should be strategic in messaging, right? So like when we say abolition of police, are we doing that because it's such a freaking obvious, right in your face, videotaped example? Or is there some other reason for that?
I mean, I'll say this about the whole concept of police abolition, for that matter, prison abolition, is, folks tend to, I'm talking about, when I say folks, I mean all kind of folks, right? I don't have one crowd in mind. But oftentimes people will have various responses to the whole concept, because part of the gaslighting that we're all differently born into is this notion that law and order, peace, everyday safety and security are somehow inseparable from the existence of these massive apparatuses of state repression, criminalization, and policing, right? It's that you can't have everyday freedom and peace without those things. And then if you get people talking, and this is the response I have to your question, Awkward. I think part of what we need to do part of what we need to do better is figure out how to tell stories better and induce people to tell their own stories better. Because I can make you a bet that I could talk to somebody from a community that has a significant criminalizing police presence, and if we started telling stories to each other, at some point, the person I'm talking to, even if they initially don't identify themselves as abolitionists or even sympathetic to abolitionist positions, they're probably going to tell a story that is conducive to them identifying with an abolitionist position. And they might even start talking and thinking like an abolitionist without using that term, which is why I don't really care about using the term abolitionist, right? Which gets at the pedagogical tactic and strategy, the political education tactic and strategy. Who gives a shit, right? The liberals are stealing that term anyways, right? I've been on in so many meetings in so many rooms with like liberal counter-revolutionaries who identify themselves as abolitionists and then go on to give you this soliloquy about all the shit you shouldn't do, right? Because you shouldn't be pushing the envelope too hard,
Exactly.
right? So yeah. So like I'm not when I say abolition, I mean it in the way I mean it. But I don't think we necessarily need to be torn down by that.
This is the first time you had you on, Dylan, because I know you mentioned it, Awkward, and I'm also curious because I'm getting to know you more, Dylan. How will you define abolition? Because I'm actually very curious, like your vision of it, if you don't mind getting into it.
I have a short definition of it that I'll give you, which is abolition means the total, absolute creative destruction of the civilization project, right? The civilization project with a capital.
I like that definition. I like
that's what it means. It's simultaneously destructive and radically creative, and we have to have both, right? It was actually, I'll say this: artists, the community of artists that engage in the Strike MoMA movement in New York City, they're the ones that drove it into my head that emphasizing the destructive necessities that accompany the abolition of civilization, right, is in no ways pessimistic. It is in no ways nihilistic. It's that destruction is actually part of a creative process, right? So those things are artificially separated because of the way
Lord Shiva taught us.
Yeah, right. Can we say this? Can we say this? So that's how I understand it in a nutshell, right? It means everything. You know what I mean? It means everything. It doesn't just mean the cops. It doesn't just mean prisons and jails. It doesn't just mean detention centers and borders. It doesn't just mean extraction of environmental capacities, resources, and life-giving things. It means that you actually have to completely and utterly destroy and transform this project. And I think we're actually in the process of doing it, by the way. There's not some fantastical shit, right? Utopia is already here. Like, people are already doing that stuff out of necessity because otherwise they wouldn't survive. But people are doing counter-civilizational, anti-civilizational shit all the time because civilization fucking hates them. Right? And if civilization hates you, the only way you're gonna live and thrive and have community is to do anti-civilization shit, and that's been going on for centuries. That some people don't pay close attention to it.
I love that. I'm gonna get you in here as well, Awkward. But as you guys know, Lord Shiva, I don't know. I'm not religious, but he's the god of destruction. Through destruction, that is how you come with creation, and that's a big part of that Hinduistic belief. But I think that there's a lot of truth in that, and that's what the smart abolitionist approach and educational messages is through the destruction of this corrupt system we can birth something better. And that destruction, a lot of people fear that. And I think through more education we can get people to be more cognizant of the idea that it's through this destruction of the system that something better will come. But Awkward, I think you're muted, so I'll pass it to you if you want to add to that. Awkward.
I think like that's education is like the biggest role for us right now. I think, when we created the 10 demands, we had an idea, and believe me, it still works. The idea that this could be taken to a city council directly, right? And we sent them to protesters, and they were used during the George Floyd protests. But I think the other part, probably the bigger part, is the education. And we've all mentioned it, I think, at one point or another, just telling stories, how we tell stories, to whom we tell stories, who gets to tell the stories, where, et cetera. And, the stories that Dylan is referring to of these anti-civilization efforts or whatever, they are existing all over the place in this country right now. And the more we know about that, the more we can be open internally to explore things with or without these conversations Dylan's talking about, that we've been taught since birth are just absurd or not even, worth considering. In Chicago, this last election, they voted decisively, like across the wards, like what would it be, like 93%, 97%, something like that, all in favor of non-police response to crisis and for public mental health centers. These and we're talking about the highest numbers being in the very Black communities that mainstream media is constantly telling us is vehemently opposed to abolition and strongest in favor of safety in their communities, which of course means via policing.
I want to get Zoya. Is there anything you want to add before I move on? Because we're about 35 minutes in. I want to cover any last thoughts on the demand, and then I have like a side topic that I want you guys to respond to regarding policing while you guys are here. So Zoya, anything else you want to add? And I'll go around and give you guys final thoughts on this demand. Anything else that you want to share? Go ahead, Zoya.
Yeah, and if you could just throw up the image that I DM'd you.
Oh yeah, here it is. Here it is. This is it's rough, but we need to see it. We need to see it. So go ahead, Zoya. You can introduce it.
It's just images from the George Floyd protests, and these aren't even the worst ones, sadly. But I don't think that even just by looking at these people that they presented any sort of danger by being out there and protesting, which is their legal First Amendment right to do. And yet the thugs that our police department attacked these unarmed civilians to this degree, causing permanent damage and harm. And I don't. Sorry.
I was about to ask, what do you guys think this is meant to accomplish? This is so people are scared to go out and protest. They know. Look at these people. Do these people like radical domestic terrorists? These are ordinary people, and they do this.
Man,
so you don't go out and protest. But sorry, Zoya, I want to get you in here. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Zoya, and I'll get you in there, Dylan.
No, and
hold on one second. I'm just curious if before this is over, we can talk about that image more.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that's also all a result of using rubber bullets. People use the term rubber bullets. They don't understand that it's about the size of your fist. They're massive. A lot of them, they're not made purely out of rubber. They have metal pieces, and the velocity with which they're shot, they're being used not the way that they're meant to at long range. They're being used at close range by these police officers, and they can break bone and cause permanent damage. A lot of people lost their eyesight and have severe injuries. And I just want people to see those images. For the ones that might be on the fence, the term abolition or defund scares them, or they have an investment in the status quo, so they want to pretend that the police are out there creating civility and safety. But this is the reality of what police action does. They are harming people that have never been convicted of a crime, that are simply in the streets expressing their feelings, expressing their rage. How can that treatment be legal in a civilized society? How can we be funding this? And now the police are starting to nationwide raid homeless encampments, and more laws are being passed to restrict where a houseless person can even sleep at, exist. And the police are being used to arrest these people and shove them into the prison industrial complex, where they're going to basically enter into 3 cents an hour slave wages for these multi-million-dollar corporations. And these conversations that Dylan was touching upon is the essence of organizing and community, having conversations with people, finding what you have common ground on and organizing around that. It's not as fun or sexy as raging against politicians or, talking about something that has high drama. There's no instant gratification, but this isn't a thing that needs to be done. Abolition. It's not just like a thing we need to go out and do. It is a lifestyle we must adopt. We must start living in connection with each other, not separation. And once we have that strength of community and independence from the system, then we can really organize general strikes and peaceful protests that force their hand.
Well said and beautifully said. As always, Zoya's love, Zoya's life, Zoya's life. And I want to get Dylan in here. Awkward, you can chime in as well. If you want to respond to anything Zoya was talking about, you also can talk about the band as well. Go ahead, Dylan.
I'm just glad to be in community with y'all. Let me just say that once again. I'm
really glad we gotta have you back on, man.
Hey, I'll come anytime anytime you invite me. I'm down to be here with you. I just appreciate and love this. And I embrace the people that are doing the chat. Like, this is good shit right here. I'll just add one thing to what Zoya, what Awkward, and what you, Nick, have been talking about, which is what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so is the depth and the complexity of a condition of terror. It is a one-directional condition of terror. It is terror that is created and performed and militarized by the state. It's directed at people engaged in various forms of freedom struggle. And in response to terror, we have to do a lot of shit, right? Demand 7 is one of them, right? Making militant policy and juridical demand is one of the responses. I will add that tied to that is, I think, we need to enrich and become much more militant and much more serious and rigorous in developing our collective conversations about what it means to engage in self-defense against this climate and condition of terror.
Yes.
We talk about
Awkward.
Yeah, I mean, I and we as a group talk about community self-defense a lot. It's interesting, when we created, this is more, I don't know, behind the scenes stuff, but like, I think the 10 demands may need, well, listen, this exists already. I mean, interrupting criminalization, they definitely have this out there. Critical resistance maybe as well. But I was just thinking, like, to your point, Dylan, that there should be like a parallel set of demands on ourselves, because these demands are put on others with, of course, the participation of ourselves, like an independent community review board of police until they don't exist, clearly involves us, the community. But beyond that, yes, like what Dylan's talking about, specifically, how do we protect ourselves? How do we do community building, mutual aid, etc. So that's something we can think about offline. But I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. And to that note, for anyone who's new to us, our website isn't just a list of our demands. We have so many resources from other people, including Dylan, who've been doing this even longer than us for the most part. And are just really able to put it in a way that you can understand it. We have books, we have videos, we have toolkits.
Look at the resources tab. Here are the books that you were talking about. But go ahead, Awkward.
No, that's it. I mean, just click the resources tab, and there's a lot there. And we'll be adding a lot more too. It's really important to me to provide this one-stop shop, so to speak. Dude, it's so hard. Great, like it's hard to find. So much has been written, and not always. And like Dylan was talking about, those people who are using these terms but don't understand what it means, or are trying to put.
Here's Dylan right here.
Yeah, of course.
So look, I'll add this, and I will get Awkward back in here. But look at all this content, guys. Look at all this amazing content. Why do we have people like TYT and other boutique leftists repeating propaganda when there are all these people they can invite on? Like, why is RBN one of the few channels that's platforming this stuff? These are the questions I want you guys to ask. Because once again, they're going to be far from the last time you guys see Dylan on here. This is something that Dylan wrote, and there are a lot of great books on here. And my goal is, since I have a platform, I'm blessed to have a platform, I'm going to highlight the people that the mainstream media is terrified of highlighting.
Yes.
Especially everyone here. But go ahead.
No, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Nick, and I'm going to hold you to it. That list is absolutely who you should interview. And anyone I can't
Oh,
get, I'm sure
100%.
you can.
Yeah, you see, we got Dylan. Like, anyone who got a recommendation from Awkward, I know is pretty powerful. Then we're gonna have Dylan on.
Oh,
you guys know in the future. So, and I see you linked this, Dylan. If you don't mind pulling this up.
Yeah, and I want to say, like,
Yeah.
to me, it's basically a tribute to the late great Glenn Ford, who passed
Yes,
away
absolutely.
not so long ago. But this thing that I recently contributed by way of Roberto Servant to Black Agenda Report is basically a tribute to Glenn Ford.
Yes.
And it's kind of a short synthesis or crystallization of a few of the thoughts that I've been trying to share with folks here about counterinsurgency and what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any last thoughts you guys have on the last demand before? Like, we got 15 minutes, but the next segment I want to do while you guys are here is regarding policing. But so, any last thoughts before we to wrap up the 7 demand segment? Going once.
I didn't see that link. The one Dylan sent. Where do
I had to get it fixed. I had to get it fixed. But here's the link that this is what Dylan this is his article we just referenced.
And Nick, you guys have Margot Kimberly on all the time, right?
Yeah, we love Mark Kimberly, like auntie here. Like, we love him. We love Mark.
She's the best. She's the best.
Yeah. So yeah, make sure you guys check out the work of Dylan. And always good having you on. I have one more topic, and I want a video I want you guys to react to as well, because it's about policing and it shows how we live in a multi-tiered law enforcement society. A lot of people think, oh, if we have law and order, we will have a civilized society. No, we have a system that is designed to protect capital and uphold hierarchies. So I think this video is very powerful, and it speaks for itself. So that's all I will preface it on, and I want you guys to react. I saw this on Twitter not too long ago. So let's watch it, and I want to get you guys' reaction.
Good evening.
How you feeling?
Good. I'm Deputy Chief of the Sheriff's Office. Stopped you because you driving tag or unregistered vehicle with no tag on it on the roadway.
Yeah, we went to the club. It was closed, so we went over and picked up some.
Is your camera on?
It is.
I'm the police chief in Tampa.
What? let's continue with the video, because at this point she's like, "Hey, I'm the member of the police chief. Your camera on?" Now watch how it continues from here.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
I'm hoping that you'll just let us go tonight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll say now that you say you look familiar, so.
Yeah, I'm sure I do.
All right, then we'll take care, and it was nice meeting you.
All right.
Oh, all right.
You ever need anything, call me.
Okay.
Serious.
All right. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You're welcome.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you.
Remember how me and CJ often say that these white people are not talking to us? So when they say the police protects and serves their community, they are telling the truth. They're not talking to us. They protect and serve their class. Here, take my card. Call me if there's anything I need to do. And I'm a chief of Tampa Police. You can surely let me off, right? These boutique capitalists, they know what the police role is, despite how much they want to gaslight workers. They know they're there to protect them. They know if they have someone in the family that's a police chief. You think that person haven't used that card the first? You think that's the first time she used that? I talked to a friend. I'm not gonna reveal her identity on here, but I talked to a friend. I'll tell you guys the story how she was a victim of domestic violence from the police, but she got off because the person who did it was the brother of the police chief, and they got off because of that. So how many times do you guys think this happens, right? So as we say, they are talking to each other. When they say the police protect and serve, they are right. They protect and serve their class. So I want to give you guys' reaction to that video. I'll start with Awkward, and then we go Dylan and Zoya. If you guys have any reactions to that, I think that backs up our point that these police are not here to serve us.
Ironically, I think people have a problem with you, Nick, because you talk too much about class, right? Maybe you don't talk enough about your skin color. Ironically, I probably talk more about race than anything else. So I'm going to point to the fact that you've brought up class many times and just, give another example. There is a guy named Temujin Kensu who has been in prison in Michigan for 35 years now, maybe. And the reason is because a police officer killed somebody, or the son of, and I interviewed him. The details are available, on my site and stuff, but and elsewhere. It was the son of a police chief killed somebody. Temujin was 350 miles away or something, and he's still rotting behind, in a cage, but sick with so many things, because they don't get health care, and trying to provide legal services for others in prison. He's doing everything he can to help everyone around him, as he nears the end of his life, because someone knew someone else, and he's white. So that was, I forgot that part, right? So it does happen just because you're not part of that clique, right?
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yes, and I often talk about, and we preach to the show all the time. I get people who are race reductionists who hate me, and I get people who class reductionists who hate me. I get it from both sides.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I know. Uncle always have my back, but we preach on this show all the time, and we had Dr. Kareem Batesh. We had a lot of main experts explain this. Class is race, and there's literally no reason to separate those. And since we're talking about policing, there was a study done in South Carolina that showed 60% of the people who was impacted by civil asset forfeiture are Black. That's the state stealing money from us because they know that we won't have the resources to win that in court. That is how the realities of our race affects our class. The fact that we had to pay higher interest rates, the fact that the state steals our money, the fact that we are 40% of the homeless population, the fact that we pay the most on medical debt. And this is the biggest blind spot.
Did you mention earnings on the dollar? I forget. I might have missed it.
Yeah, it's something crazy. I don't know the exact stat, but it's something crazy like that. And this is the biggest blind spot of the liberals in the Democratic Party, because they think identity politics and just talking about race is all about, we got Lloyd Austin as our defense secretary. We got Karine Jean-Pierre as the press secretary, who's going to manufacture consent towards the United States invading her own country. That is not how identity politics is supposed to be used. And I had a conversation with any people who are critical of identity politics, but they like the way we do it because we do it based on the material. So I'm gonna call you anti-Black if you're against Medicare fraud, because I know how that affects the reality of the Black class. If you are anti-homeless, if you advancing and apologizing for the policies of Eric Adams, that is anti-Black. If you build the prison industrial complex, that is anti-Black. Kamala Harris is one of the most anti-Black vice presidents we ever had based on her record. And this is the blind spot the Democrats miss, and that's why they can't reconcile with RBN's existence. Well, I'm glad we got people with Awkward that has our back. But go ahead, Awkward, and I'll get Dylan and Zoya in here as well.
I don't know if I was on mute. All I said was well said. That's it, man.
Yeah. So let's get Dylan and Zoya.
So I appreciate this is my first time on the show. So I just want to say I appreciate any place I can go where it seems like the premise is that the Democratic Party is a primary force of counterinsurgency.
Yes.
If we can begin, any conversation where we can begin from that premise means that we're going to probably get somewhere interesting and important in the process of working through. But as importantly, it'll help us identify who flimsy people are and who maybe some disappointing and sometimes unexpected enemies are. I think part of what these last 50 minutes have encouraged me and emboldened me to do is to further encourage everyone to identify enemies in ways that might be uncomfortable. Right?
That's exactly what RBN does. I love that you say that.
This is what we have to do. We have to identify enemies, and one way I think to quickly identify people who are enemies or drifting into enemy territory is to look at complicities and interactions with the Democratic Party. There is nothing reconcilable. There is nothing to be gained from being directly involved or substantially involved with the Democratic Party. So there's that, right? Second thing I want to say, I'm a racial capitalism person. I'm also a Fanonist, right? So when I think capitalism and I think race and I think coloniality, I think of what Fanon famously said about how it is in the colonial context. The cause is the consequence, which is why the old classical orthodox Marxist, definitions need to be rethought, because in the colonies you are rich because you were white, and you were white because you were rich. And I think we translate that into the idea of racial capitalism and just understand that what the great Cedric Robinson meant by that is that there's a fundamental declared and undeclared raging warfare that happens as the condition of possibility for capitalism's reproduction and spread, right? And that undeclared and declared war is usually against Black folks and dark-skinned people. It's against people in what used to be called the third world. It's against colonized and occupied people. I want to give a shout out to the late Kevin Johnson and his survivors and his family, his loved ones, state of Missouri. And this illustrates the point. The state of Missouri executed him last week. And the conditions that led to his execution, he killed a cop when he was 19, right? What we need to understand is what led to the circumstances that led to him pulling the trigger, which is the cops basically by way of callous neglect stepped over the body of his dying 12-year-old brother in his own house and let him die. Right now, I said this publicly before. I'll say it here again. I don't know that I wouldn't do the same thing Kevin did if that happened to my brother. Right. And I was 19. I don't know that I wouldn't do the same thing. But I will say this in
I'm
a
hothead.
I don't think you even need to be a hothead, my friend. Like, I think it's just love. Like, love might, for your brother, might have you do something that will lead to the consequences that Kevin Johnson's body just absorb. But I'll say that in that circumstance, you have almost contemporaneous with Kevin Johnson's case, an almost identical case of a white person of a similar age who also killed a cop. And the state went out of its way to ensure that he would not face the death penalty, right? So in the state of Missouri, we're thinking about racial capitalism. You are alive because you are white, and Kevin Johnson is dead because he is Black. All right, I talk about him in the present tense on purpose. The third thing I'll say, the video you just showed us, that shit is a gateway drug. That thing that she did, this little ritual of showing the card, and like, that's a gateway drug to a term everybody needs to know if they don't already know it, the term being qualified immunity, right? That is literally the license to kill. And what you see playing out in this kind of weird, benign, Karen-like situation on a golf cart is a version of that passage toward impunity, right? Police impunity, qualified immunity. And the last thing I'll say, that Tampa police chief needs to resign just because she got caught in a whack-ass golf cart. That shit is embarrassing. She should be embarrassed to get caught on a fucking golf cart. So she should resign. I'm pretty sure she resigned just because of that, because that shit is just so whack, so embarrassing.
She took a ton of heat. She paid some fine, and I saw a comment on here that said she retired. So
she resigned. She didn't retire. She resigned.
Yeah, she resigned. I mean, yeah. So, and I want you guys to know, apparently that cop turned that body camera in, and that's the only reason why the consequences happened. Imagine how many times this stuff happened, and she got away with it. Apparently a lot, because she was in the field for a long time. So she ran to finally the one guy, the one person who turned it in. But Dylan, do you have anything else you want to finish? And I want to get Zoya in here as well, if you had another thought.
No, just appreciation to the community of people that you convene here, and I hope we can continue to activate around some of the insights and some of the conversation and incitement that we're engaging in.
You guys definitely gonna see Dylan a lot more. Again, a lot more introduced to his work. Great having you on, and you guys are gonna see more Dylan. Let's get Zoya in here, and then we do final thoughts, because we're gonna wrap up here in the next 2-3 minutes. Zoya, any final thoughts that you have on anything that we shared or discussed today?
Yeah, just in many ways, we have already lost our right to protest. We have to protest anyways. Just like those teachers in West Virginia that went on strike, even though it's illegal, we cannot let the system intimidate us. Protest historically is the most effective way to force change. There are many others, and they work in tandem, but putting their violence, reflecting it back at them in the streets, is the fastest way to make them pay attention. The system is not broken. It's working exactly as intended. And it will not change without us putting in the work and applying pressure. As far as safety, our schools aren't safe. Our food isn't safe. Our water isn't safe. We have an illusion of safety. So we have to give up the comfort of this cognitive dissonance and truly develop revolutionary discipline in everything that we do. There's a George Floyd happening every day. Just no cameras, so we choose not to think about it. And I just want to say that we cannot be afraid to lose. We cannot be afraid to be truly free. We must all take action ourselves every day and not wait one more day while this violence continues in our streets.
Well said. Always powerfully said by Zoya. We're gonna begin wrapping this panel up. I want to pass it to Dylan if you want to share where people can find you. Any last shout outs? I appreciate you leaking this in the chat as well, Dylan. This and I can plug this because we always want to plug as many actions as we can. The United Fair Workers are striking.
UAW,
UAW.
UAW
So they are
2865.
all right, cool. So they are on strike. Make sure you guys show support if you're in the area. Show solidarity. So this is a great action to highlight at the end. UAW strike here. Any last things you want to say, Dylan? Any last thing you want to plug?
Yeah, I just want to conclude by just encouraging all the folks who watch the show live and watch it later to just log into that website, fairucnow.org. Get informed about this ongoing strike. It's a historic moment. It's the largest strike in the history of United States universities and colleges. It is ongoing. The University of California administration is evil as shit. The most recent offer they gave is fucking dehumanizing for these graduate student teachers and workers. And I'll repeat what I've been saying over and over again over the last week, which is the UC administration is maltreating, abusing, and destroying the very people who spend more time with undergraduate students in the space of 5 days than almost every administrator will spend with an undergraduate student in 5 years. So this is a vital strike if we're going to try to continue to have any traction within the terrain of colleges and universities, which in my view is really critical if we're trying to find spaces of relative maneuverability, because shit is getting so shut down everywhere else. So I think this is an important struggle. Please support it, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan, and definitely looking forward to having you on again because we cover this. Like I cover police abolition probably more, second most than anyone independent media. Awkward probably has me beat. Like in terms of anyone independent, like in terms of coverage of the police state. Me and Awkward, I would confidently say is leading the way. And I'm like almost every stream, almost every week, I highlight this stuff. So we definitely will be calling on you again for your expertise. What I'm gonna pop you guys out because I got some super chats to read, and now I'm gonna wrap up the stream. After that, we're gonna do demand 8 here very soon. Just contact me, Awkward. We got to set that up. Dylan, you're always welcome for these conversations as well. So